The suit of swords represents the element of air, the realm of thought, communication, truth, and decision-making. Where the cups speak to the heart, the swords speak to the mind. They cut through illusion, revealing clarity, but can also wound if used without care. This suit is concerned with intellect, perception, and the choices we make based on what we understand. It deals with reasoning, analysis, justice, and conflict, the mental processes that shape our experiences. When swords appear in a reading, they often point to matters of communication, ethical decisions, problem solving, and the ways we use or misuse our words and thoughts. At their best, the swords bring truth, insight, and intellectual breakthrough. They show us how to think critically, communicate clearly, and act with integrity. At their most challenging, they can signal tension, arguments, cold logic without compassion, or mental strain. Just as a sword can be a tool of defense or a weapon, the mind can liberate or harm depending on how it is used. The suit of swords is linked to the air signs, Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, each with its own way of engaging with thought and truth. Gemini brings curiosity and communication, Libra focuses on fairness and balance, and Aquarius offers vision and objectivity. From the sharp clarity of the ace to the complex trials of the 10, the swords trace a journey through the mental realm, from new ideas to the resolution of challenges. They remind us that thoughts shape reality, but also that wisdom comes from balancing mind, heart, and action. So ask yourself, how are you wielding your mental power? Is your truth cutting to heal or to harm? Because the suit of swords teaches one essential lesson: the mind is sharp, use it well. The Ace of Swords is a card of clarity, truth, and mental breakthrough. In the image, a hand emerges from a cloud, holding a gleaming sword upright. A crown encircles the blade, adorned with laurel and palm leaves, symbols of victory and achievement. Behind it, the sky is vast, with mountains in the distance, reminding us that truth clears the way forward, but the journey still lies ahead. Upright, the Ace of Swords represents a powerful moment of insight. This could be a sudden realization, a new perspective, or the courage to speak the truth. It cuts through confusion, offering mental clarity where there was once doubt. This card often signals the start of a new idea, project, or conversation, one guided by honesty and precision. Reversed, the sword's edge can become blurred. Confusion, miscommunication, or half-truths may cloud the situation. You might be struggling to see the facts clearly, or feeling paralyzed by too many competing thoughts. It can also warn of using truth as a weapon, cutting others down rather than using clarity to build understanding. Astrologically, the Ace of Swords resonates with the air signs, Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, and the energy of pure mental potential. Its element is air, representing thought, speech, and intellectual vision. When the Ace of Swords appears, it's an invitation to embrace the truth, even if it's uncomfortable. This is the moment to think clearly, speak honestly, and act with purpose. The sword is in your hand. How you use it matters. So ask yourself, what truth is ready to be spoken or acknowledged? And are you willing to see things exactly as they are? Because this card reminds you, clarity is power, and with it comes the responsibility to use it wisely. The Two of Swords is a card of decision, balance, and mental crossroads. In the image, a blindfolded figure sits by the sea, holding two swords crossed over their chest. The water behind them is calm, but dotted with rocks, obstacles that are unseen yet present. The moon hangs in the sky, hinting at intuition and the unseen forces at play. Upright, the Two of Swords represents a choice that needs to be made, but where clarity is lacking. You may be avoiding a decision, hoping it will resolve itself, or feeling torn between two equally compelling options. The blindfold suggests that facts alone may not be enough. Intuition and emotional honesty are also required. This card encourages you to pause, gather the information you need, and trust both mind and heart in making your choice. Reversed, the Two of Swords can signal indecision tipping into stagnation, or a refusal to see the truth. It might reflect confusion caused by hidden information, or an internal block that stops you from choosing a path. Alternatively, it may mean a decision has been made, but uncertainty about its consequences remains. Astrologically, the Two of Swords corresponds to the moon in Libra, a blend of emotional awareness and the desire for harmony, sometimes at the cost of direct action. The element is air, highlighting logic, perspective, and the need for mental clarity. When the Two of Swords appears, it's a sign to face the decision at hand with honesty. Waiting forever will not make the answer clearer. Sometimes movement is the only way to see the path. So ask yourself, what truth are you avoiding? And what would happen if you faced it now? Because this card reminds you, not choosing is still a choice. The Three of Swords is a card of heartbreak, sorrow, and emotional truth. In the image, three swords pierce a red heart suspended against a grey, rain-filled sky. The imagery is simple yet powerful, a direct expression of pain, loss, and difficult realizations. The storm suggests that emotions are raw, but like all weather, it will pass. Upright, the Three of Swords points to emotional wounding, heartbreak in love, disappointment in trust, or grief over something deeply valued. It can also represent moments of painful clarity, where truth cuts sharply, but reveals what must be faced. While this card can be difficult, it is not without purpose. It reminds us that pain is part of growth, and that healing often begins with acknowledging the hurt. Reversed, the card may indicate that the pain is lifting, old wounds are healing, or forgiveness is possible. Alternatively, it can point to suppressed grief or unresolved hurt that still needs expression. Avoiding the truth may delay, rather than prevent, the healing process. Astrologically, the Three of Swords is linked to Saturn in Libra, the meeting point between life's lessons and the desire for fairness and harmony. The element is air, showing that the root of the pain often lies in communication, perception, or realization, rather than pure emotion alone. When the Three of Swords appears, it's a moment to honor what you feel without rushing past it. Pain acknowledged is pain that can be healed. So ask yourself, what truth has pierced your heart? And how can you care for yourself in its wake? Because this card reminds you, the storm clears, and while the heart may be changed, it can still beat strongly again. The Four of Swords is a card of rest, recovery, and quiet reflection. In the image, a figure lies on a stone tomb, hands folded in prayer or meditation. Above them, three swords hang on the wall, while one sword rests beneath them. A stained glass window shows a scene of compassion and blessing, suggesting that this stillness is not abandonment, but sanctuary. Upright, the Four of Swords calls for a pause. It may follow a period of stress, conflict, or emotional strain, a reminder that the mind and body both need time to recover. This is not the moment for action or decision-making, but for mental clarity, spiritual grounding, and physical rest. By stepping back, you create space for renewal and fresh perspective. Reversed, the card can indicate restlessness, burnout, or avoidance of the stillness you actually need. You may be trying to push forward when your energy is depleted, or resisting time alone because it feels uncomfortable. Alternatively, it may mean you are emerging from a period of rest, ready to re-engage with the world. Astrologically, the Four of Swords corresponds to Jupiter in Libra, the expansion of harmony, balance, and recovery through reflection. The element is air, showing that this is a pause for the mind as much as for the body. When the Four of Swords appears, it's an invitation to step away from noise and demands. Rest is not weakness, it is preparation. So ask yourself, where in your life is stillness needed? And are you willing to honor it before moving forward? Because this card reminds you, even the sharpest sword must be sheathed if it is to remain strong. The Five of Swords is a card of conflict, tension, and the consequences of winning at any cost. In the image, a figure stands holding three swords, looking back over their shoulder. Two more swords lie on the ground, and in the distance, two people walk away in defeat. The sky is grey and unsettled, suggesting that the outcome, though decisive, may not feel like a true victory. Upright, the Five of Swords often points to arguments, competition, or power struggles where someone is determined to come out on top, even if it damages relationships. It can indicate the need to ask yourself whether the fight is worth it, or whether pride and ego are leading the way. Sometimes it's a warning about manipulation, dishonesty, or a hollow sense of triumph. Reversed, the card may show reconciliation, lessons learned from past disputes, or an awareness of how conflict has cost more than it gave. It can also reflect lingering resentment or the difficulty of letting go after a disagreement. Astrologically, the Five of Swords is linked to Venus in Aquarius, the tension between individuality and connection, and the challenge of keeping compassion alive during conflict. Its element is air, focusing on words, thoughts, and mental strategies rather than physical battle. When the Five of Swords appears, it asks you to consider the bigger picture. Sometimes stepping away is wiser than proving a point. True strength is not always about domination. It can also be about choosing peace. So ask yourself, what does winning really mean to you in this situation? And is it worth the cost? Because this card reminds you, a hollow victory leaves the heart as empty as the field once the battle is over. The Six of Swords is a card of transition, healing, and moving toward calmer ground. In the image, a small boat carries three figures across a body of water. The swords stand upright in the boat, symbolizing the lessons and experiences they carry with them. The waters near the boat are choppy, but ahead lies a smooth, still expanse. This is a journey away from turbulence and toward a more peaceful place. Upright, the Six of Swords suggests leaving a difficult situation behind. This may be a physical move, a change in circumstances, or an emotional shift. It is not an escape in haste, but a conscious choice to move toward better conditions. While the journey may not be easy, it promises relief and the hope of renewal. Reversed, the card can indicate resistance to change, difficulty letting go, or feeling stuck between where you've been and where you want to go. It may also suggest returning to an old situation, willingly or otherwise, to resolve unfinished matters. Astrologically, the Six of Swords corresponds to Mercury in Aquarius, a blend of clear thinking and forward vision, with a willingness to explore new possibilities. The element is air, showing that this passage is guided by perspective, logic, and mental clarity, even when emotions feel unsettled. When the Six of Swords appears, it is a quiet but firm reassurance that progress is possible. You are moving toward calmer waters, even if you can't yet see the full shore. So ask yourself, what are you ready to leave behind? And how can you make the journey easier on yourself? Because this card reminds you, healing isn't always a sudden leap. Sometimes it's a slow, steady crossing to a place where you can finally rest. The Seven of Swords is a card of strategy, secrecy, and the blurred line between cunning and dishonesty. In the image, a figure slips away from a camp carrying 5 swords in their arms, while 2 remain planted in the ground. They glance back over their shoulder, as if checking whether they've been seen. The scene suggests careful planning, or perhaps deception. Upright, the Seven of Swords can indicate a need for tact and discretion. Sometimes it points to working quietly on your own plans, protecting your ideas, or taking an unconventional approach to achieve your goals. Other times, it warns of dishonesty, hidden motives, or avoidance of responsibility, either by you or someone else. This is a card that asks, are you acting in integrity or taking shortcuts that could cost you later? Reversed, the card can reveal the truth coming to light, the exposure of deception, or a return to honesty after a period of secrecy. It may also suggest self-deception, convincing yourself of something that deep down you know is untrue. Astrologically, the Seven of Swords is linked to the moon in Aquarius, an energy that blends independent thinking with the tendency to keep things hidden, whether for protection or personal advantage. The element is air, connecting this card to mental planning, strategy, and communication. When the Seven of Swords appears, it invites you to think carefully about your methods and motives. Cleverness is valuable, but when it crosses into dishonesty, the cost can outweigh the gain. So ask yourself, are you protecting your plans or avoiding accountability? Because this card reminds you, strategy can be a strength, but without honesty, it becomes a trap of your own making. The Eight of Swords is a card of restriction, self-doubt, and the feeling of being trapped. In the image, a blindfolded woman stands surrounded by 8 swords planted upright in the ground. Her arms are bound, and she stands on soft, wet ground near water, a symbol of emotions. The sky is grey, but the space around her is open enough to escape if she chooses. This is a prison of the mind rather than an unbreakable barrier. Upright, the Eight of Swords represents a sense of limitation, often caused by fear, uncertainty, or negative self-talk. You may feel powerless, unable to see a way forward, or paralyzed by conflicting thoughts. This card reminds you that while your situation may be challenging, your mind might be holding you more tightly than reality does. The way out begins with shifting perspective and believing in your ability to act. Reversed, the Eight of Swords can signal release from restriction, gaining clarity, or reclaiming personal power after a period of fear. It may also indicate continued avoidance, refusing to face the truth because it feels too overwhelming. Astrologically, the Eight of Swords corresponds to Jupiter in Gemini, expansion and opportunity limited by overthinking, doubt, or excessive mental chatter. The element is air, highlighting thoughts, perceptions, and the influence of the mind on how we experience reality. When the Eight of Swords appears, it's a call to recognize that the key to freedom often lies within your own thoughts and choices. So ask yourself, are you truly trapped? Or are you holding yourself in place with old beliefs? Because this card reminds you, the moment you choose to see clearly, the path out begins to appear. The Nine of Swords is a card of anxiety, worry, and mental unrest. In the image, a figure sits upright in bed, hands covering their face. 9 swords hang on the dark wall above them, like looming thoughts that will not let them rest. The quilt on the bed is decorated with roses and astrological symbols, reminders that beauty and order still exist, even when the mind is caught in turmoil. Upright, the Nine of Swords represents sleepless nights, overthinking, or emotional distress that feels relentless. You may be replaying conversations, imagining worst-case scenarios, or feeling weighed down by guilt, fear, or regret. While the feelings are real, this card asks you to recognize that the mind can magnify worries until they seem larger than they truly are. Reversed, the Nine of Swords may point to relief from anxiety, or the slow process of letting go of fearful thoughts. It can also signal that worry has been suppressed rather than addressed, which can keep it lingering in the background. Facing the root cause is essential for true release. Astrologically, the Nine of Swords corresponds to Mars in Gemini, mental energy that can either solve problems or exhaust itself in constant overthinking. The element is air, showing that this struggle is largely mental and may not match the reality of the situation. When the Nine of Swords appears, it's a compassionate nudge to acknowledge your fears without letting them rule you. Support, perspective, and self-kindness are crucial now. So ask yourself, are you carrying worries alone that could be shared? And is your mind telling the whole truth, or just the most fearful version of it? Because this card reminds you, the dawn is always closer than it feels in the darkest hour. The Ten of Swords is a card of endings, release, and the finality of a difficult chapter. In the image, a figure lies face down on the ground, with 10 swords piercing their back. The scene is dramatic. The sky is dark and heavy, yet on the horizon, the first light of dawn is breaking. This is a card of closure, where something has come to a complete and irreversible end. Upright, the Ten of Swords represents a painful conclusion. This could be the collapse of a relationship, a sudden realization, betrayal, or a situation that has run its course. While the imagery is intense, it also carries the promise that the worst is over. What's been endured cannot happen again in the same way. There is now space for renewal and a fresh start. Reversed, the card may suggest recovery after hardship, the lifting of burdens, or a slow release from something that has held you down. Alternatively, it can indicate resistance to letting go, clinging to something long past its natural end. Astrologically, the Ten of Swords is linked to the Sun in Gemini, a pairing that blends sharp mental awareness with the ability to see truth clearly, even if it's uncomfortable. The element is air, emphasizing perspective, thought, and the mental processing of endings. When the Ten of Swords appears, it's a moment to acknowledge reality fully and to allow yourself to move on. Painful as it may be, endings clear the ground for new beginnings. So ask yourself, what is finished? And how can you honor its closure? Because this card reminds you, when the night feels darkest, the sunrise is already breaking just beyond the horizon. The Page of Swords is a card of curiosity, alertness, and the eagerness to learn. In the image, a young figure stands on uneven ground, holding a sword upright and glancing over their shoulder. The wind blows through their hair, and clouds move swiftly in the sky, suggesting quick thinking and readiness for change. This page is watchful, prepared to act, question, and explore. Upright, the Page of Swords represents a thirst for knowledge, fresh ideas, and mental agility. You may be beginning a new study, conversation, or project, and your mind is alive with questions. It can also signal important news or a message coming your way. This card encourages you to stay alert, think critically, and be willing to adapt as new information arrives. Reversed, the page's energy may turn restless, scattered, or overly defensive. It can point to gossip, misunderstandings, or speaking before you have the full story. It may also indicate hesitation to speak your truth, or a need to double-check facts before taking action. Astrologically, the Page of Swords resonates with the element of air in its youthful form, representing Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. Qualities like curiosity, communication, and quick wit. This is mental energy at the stage of exploration, rather than mastery. When the Page of Swords appears, it's an invitation to remain open, ask questions, and approach life as a student of experience. Listen carefully, speak thoughtfully, and be ready to learn from what you observe. So ask yourself, what new truth is ready to be explored? And are you willing to hear perspectives that challenge your own? Because this card reminds you, knowledge is a journey, and every answer you find will open the door to another question. The Knight of Swords is a card of swift action, determination, and intellectual drive. In the image, a knight charges forward on a galloping horse, sword raised high with clouds racing overhead and trees bent in the wind. His energy is fierce, focused, and relentless. This is a figure who moves without hesitation toward their goal. Upright, the Knight of Swords represents ambition, direct communication, and the courage to act decisively. It may signal a sudden burst of motivation, the arrival of important news, or the need to tackle a challenge head-on. This card encourages clarity of thought, quick decision-making, and the confidence to move forward. But it also warns against acting so fast that you overlook details or consequences. Reversed, the Knight's energy can become reckless, impulsive, or confrontational. It might indicate rushing into arguments, acting on incomplete information, or pushing an agenda too forcefully. It may also suggest mental burnout from constantly running at full speed without pause. Astrologically, the Knight of Swords aligns with air in its active, forceful form, often associated with Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius when they are driven by conviction and urgency. The element of air brings logic, ideas, and communication to the forefront. But here it is fueled by speed and intensity. When the Knight of Swords appears, it's a sign to harness determination while keeping sight of strategy. Moving boldly is valuable, but only when your direction is as clear as your drive. So ask yourself, are you charging toward your goal with a clear plan, or just charging forward for the sake of movement? Because this card reminds you, speed can win the race, but only if you're heading in the right direction. The Queen of Swords is a card of clarity, truth, and perceptive wisdom. In the image, the Queen sits tall on her throne, sword held upright in one hand while the other extends forward in welcome, or perhaps in challenge. The sky behind her is bright and clear, reflecting her sharp mind and ability to see through pretense. She is fair but firm, warm yet uncompromising when it comes to truth. Upright, the Queen of Swords represents clear thinking, strong boundaries, and honest communication. She may symbolize a person, wise, perceptive, and direct, or an energy you are being called to embody. This card encourages you to cut through confusion, speak your truth without embellishment, and make decisions based on facts rather than wishful thinking. Reversed, her clarity can turn cold. It may point to harshness, overcritical thinking, or the shutting down of emotions entirely. Alternatively, it could signal difficulty expressing yourself openly, perhaps out of fear of judgment or rejection. The challenge is to balance truth with compassion. Astrologically, the Queen of Swords is connected to Libra and Virgo energy, analytical, fair, and precise, with an emphasis on justice and reason. Her element is air, highlighting thought, communication, and perspective. When the Queen of Swords appears, it's a sign to trust your judgment. See the situation for what it is, not just for what you hope it to be. Be open to dialogue, but do not waver in your principles. So ask yourself, are you speaking and acting from a place of truth? And are you balancing reason with empathy? Because this card reminds you, clarity is a gift, but it is strongest when tempered with understanding. The King of Swords is a card of authority, intellect, and strategic clarity. In the image, the king sits firmly on his throne, sword held upright in his right hand. His gaze is direct, his posture confident. The sky is clear and the trees stand still, reflecting the stability and order that come from decisive, well-considered judgment. This is a ruler of the mind, fair, logical, and committed to truth. Upright, the King of Swords represents mental mastery, ethical leadership, and the ability to see situations objectively. He may symbolize a person who offers wise counsel, or the qualities you are being called to develop: discernment, strategic thinking, and the courage to act on what you know is right. This card encourages you to make decisions based on reason, facts, and a broader perspective, rather than emotion alone. Reversed, the king's clarity can become rigid or misused. It may indicate manipulation through words, overbearing authority, or making decisions without compassion. Alternatively, it can signal self-doubt in your own reasoning or difficulty speaking with confidence. Astrologically, the King of Swords is tied to Aquarius energy, visionary, rational, and capable of seeing the bigger picture. Though his qualities can also align with Gemini and Libra, his element is air, representing thought, communication, and fairness. When the King of Swords appears, it's a reminder to step into your authority with integrity, weigh the evidence, speak with honesty, and lead from a place of mental strength. So ask yourself, are you making choices guided by truth and principle? And are you using your influence to bring clarity, not control? Because this card reminds you, the sharpest mind is one that serves justice, not ego.